In vista della Giornata della Terra abbiamo intervistato il Commissario europeo all'azione per il clima, Wopke Hoekstra, che è di fatto l'uomo europeo dietro alle politiche climatiche della nostra Unione. È lui che è responsabile dell'attuazione del Green Deal, è lui che sta monitorando per arrivare agli obiettivi che ci siamo dati per il 2050 in materia di abbattimento delle emissioni, ed è sempre lui che sta in qualche modo seguendo l'industria attraverso una faticosa transizione energetica, a maggior ragione in questo momento.
È un lavoro che dall'inizio del secondo mandato di Donald Trump, che ha scombussolato gli equilibri geopolitici ed economici a livello mondiale, si è complicato ulteriormente, e la guerra in Iran e la prospettiva di una crisi energetica ed economica non ha migliorato questa situazione.
Sì, e infatti il commissario durante l'intervista è tornato più volte sull'importanza di rendersi autonomi a livello europeo dal punto di vista energetico, ma anche dal punto di vista commerciale. Ci ha parlato degli accordi che l'Europa ha siglato recentemente con l'India, con l'Australia, con l'America del Sud, e poi è tornato spesso sul tema del nucleare, che tra l'altro è un tema per l'Italia sensibile, perché restiamo tra i pochi paesi grandi perlomeno che non hanno una produzione di energia nucleare.
E infatti abbiamo fatto qualche domanda, sulla posizione dell'Italia nei confronti dell'azione climatica e delle climate policies, visto che l'Italia non è esattamente il paese più entusiasta, soprattutto per quel che riguarda il Green Deal, ma il commissario è stato piuttosto diplomatico nelle risposte.
Ma io direi di andarcela a guardare questa intervista, l'abbiamo registrata presso la sede romana della Commissione europea. I would like to start with the elephant in the room, Mr. Donald Trump. So how has the, European policy changed since the beginning of the second mandate of Donald Trump?
And you mean specifically in the domain of climate or more at large?
No, in climate specifically. I mean, have we become less ambitious?
We haven't, but it is also clear that international climate diplomacy has not become easier. And look, the US is the most formidable power across the globe. It is the richest economy, and it is the second largest emitter. So when a country with that magnitude and with that might basically checks out, all the others feel the negative consequences. It's unfortunate, but that is the reality.
Also, another elephant in the room would be war, probably, and the energy crisis that is coming with the war. So with all this global shifting and a global shifting leadership, how difficult it is for the EU to stay on track with these climate policies?
Well, first, indeed, I mean, we're living in a world with a multitude of crises. We already had the horrible war the Russians are waging in Ukraine. We already had the assertiveness, some would say aggression, of the Chinese in their area of the world. We had turmoil in the Middle East already for years now. And on top of that, there is the situation in Iran with huge consequences for Italian citizens, but European and global citizens across the globe. So that is having huge effects on all of us. At the same time, and that is maybe in a way the irony of it, whether you change your energy model because of climate or because of competitiveness and just what you pay or because of independence, it should always be the same. We need more electrification, we need more solar, more wind, more storage capacity and more nuclear. That is the recipe that Europe desperately needs, because otherwise we will always be at the receiving end of another oil or gas crisis.
Well, actually, Italy is one of the two major countries who retrieved from nuclear power. So what is the message to its government?
I can only salute the comments by Prime Minister Meloni and also by Minister Fratin that they are looking into a nuclear renaissance. So it is up to member states. It's up to member states to decide what their exact policy mix is. And some have been, across the political spectrum, very much in favor of nuclear. Others have been against it. Personally, I don't see how Europe can get out of this situation of dependence. And I also don't see how we solve the climate problem we're having without electrification, without solar and wind, and also without nuclear. We need much more of all of that. Personally, I think it is a good idea to prolong the life of the nuclear installations we already have. And secondly, embark on these small modular reactors, which you can build much more quickly. Because I'm convinced it will help again for climate, for competitiveness, but also for independence.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Let's turn the page of nuclear energy for the moment, at least. And I mean, if I think about what the Commission has been doing in the last months, also as a response to Donald Trump's policies and tariffs, they've been working a lot on new commercial deals across the world. So they finally managed to sign the Mercosur deal, even if it's a little bit troubled in the European institutions. This acceptation,
complications,
a little bit of complication.
Life.
Yeah, but still, they managed to sign somehow a deal that has
not all complication lasts 20 years, if I may.
Exactly, that had lasted 20 years of negotiations. So they arrived to a conclusion on that. Same with India, same with Australia. So really trying to differentiate the partners that we have across the world to not be dependent on the states anymore, to make it clear. One of the big concerns in this type of deals that we're making is the fact that we risk importing in Europe a lot of products. I'm talking about the food, but not just that will follow rules of production that are not the same that we keep in Europe, and especially from an environmental point of view that can impact on the world carbonization much more. Yeah. So I'm asking you, what have we done to be sure and secure a good deal from that point of view for Europe?
So first, let's acknowledge the huge importance of these trade deals, because we are living in a world where many of the certainties of the past have just vanished, also in terms of the transatlantic relationship. And as much as I find it unfortunate, because I've always been an advocate of strong EU-US cooperation, this simply is the way it is. So what do you do in such a situation? You embark on, ever more relationships with others, and you seek to diversify. And that's precisely what the Commission has sought to do with, indeed, finally securing the deal with our friends in Latin America. Coming up with a deal with India that has also been years in the making. And a country, hugely important country of 1.4 billion people. And recently with our friends in Australia. Hugely important. Secondly, what we have managed to secure is setting the standards in category of climate, in category of the environment, but also in looking very carefully where our own producers might have been at the receiving end of an unfair situation. That is, for example, the reason why we have excluded much more of the agricultural products in the case of India when you compare it with the Mercosur deal. So every single time we look at the specificities and what the optimal set of results is for the European Union, for our workers, for our citizens, and for climate. Are these deals always 100% the way you like them? No, because it always takes two to tango. But these are huge steps forward, also from a climate perspective, from my point of view.
So you're satisfied with them? I mean, is there anything you would have liked to?
Look, I mean, there's nothing
to make better.
There's almost nothing in life where you could not articulate how it could become even better. But it is just look at it from this perspective. We're setting common standards in terms of climate policies and production policies that are standards these countries need to live up to, and we as well. And that is a huge win, because in the base case, that would have not been the set of standards for, in this case, the Mercosur countries or India or Australia. So whether you look at this through the lens of trade or through the lens of geopolitics, or through the lens of climate and nature, in all dimensions, I think these are hugely important steps in the right direction.
So let's get back into the EU borders for now. And there's a huge debate going on about the emissions trading system. And it remains central, but it faces a lot of political criticism from the government of Italy and others. Meloni even called it a twisted mechanism. So is it the time to review it? Do you think it can work better? Or it's good as it is?
So first, we were already planning to review it in order to look at how we can make it as effective as possible. With all member states, including those who might have been a bit more skeptical, we've had very fruitful conversations, and there isn't a single member state who would want to abolish the system. And by the way, the vast majority of member states is very much in favor of it. Because it is a market-based system, the money goes back to the member states and it helps companies.
Yeah, obviously. I have to say that also Italy only spent 9% of all the money that it could have got from the ETS. So that's big.
Well, they've spent, every single member state gets 80% of the money back, and all the member states spend all of that money. Where I think we have an opportunity as a European Union is to make sure that the companies that have generated this money get more back to make sure they are successful in selling their products. They are successful in the European market. They manage to become cleaner, because that is going to be hugely important also for their future competitiveness. So the system is not perfect, but it is working very well, and we're looking into how can we further advance it? How can we tailor to also some of the worries that Italy has voiced? How can we make sure that we help our companies even more? How do we manage to marry flexibility that is needed on the one hand with conditionalities so that these companies keep investing in Europe? The name of the game here is, again, climate competitiveness and independence. And we need to make sure that the great companies we're having in Italy, but also in France, in Germany, across Europe, that these companies succeed not just today, but also in the future, and stay successful here in Europe. That is the name of the game. And at the same time, they have to become cleaner. Personally, I feel that is very much doable, but it will take private and public effort.
I wonder, someone might define our current government as a climate skeptical from many points of views. In the European Union, we're one of the bigger countries that are against new improvements in climate policies. We are not fan of the Green Deal neither. We have continuative debates in the in the Italian political sphere around what Europe demands us to do for climate and how this is creating an economical damage to our, companies mainly. So, as a European Commission member, as a commissioner, do you have a specific stance towards the European position on climate currently? Do you have a focus on our country that you want to share with us?
I'm more positive in general, because we have worked very well with the the government that I have always experienced as pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine, pro-business. So my general experience has been very positive. But also, let's look at the facts in the domain of climate. Italy has played a very important role in the international negotiations and the COPs with Minister Fratin, but also others. Italy has signed up to an ambitious target for 2040 and the legislation there. And also in many of the other policy areas, and I'm actually positive the same is going to happen in the domain of the ETS, we will find a way forward. Again, that marries the short term with the long term. Climate objectives with the objectives of business and independence, because that in the end is the only way forward. We have no choice to continue with climate policy. Just look at all the damage that also Italy is suffering in terms of heat waves, in terms of droughts, and other places in Europe are suffering in terms of floods. But we will not save the day if our policy pushes our companies out of the European Union, because that would mean we lose jobs, we lose economically, we get more dependent on others, and we're going to probably import dirtier stuff from the outside. So we need to make sure it is climate and competitiveness and independence all at the same time. So
climate skeptical is definitely an exaggerated adjective for Italy.
I am, as I said, I'm genuinely positive about the conversation I'm having with Minister Tajani, Minister Fratin, but also the other interlocutors from the government on the various topics.
So let's back to EU policy. The Clean Industrial Deal aims to support the transformation of the European industry and keep it competitive with other global giants like China and the United States. So at this point, almost a year on, or maybe a little more than a year on. So if I have to ask you, what proof do you have? What concrete evidence do you have of the fact that the Clean Industrial Deal is already delivering some results? What would it be?
First, there is the simplification agenda, where we have made huge progress in pushing simplification. And frankly speaking, we shouldn't be complacent. We are not nearly done. That is one. Secondly, we have come up with huge changes in the domain of electrification and pushing the boundaries in terms of grids packages and connecting the countries in Europe, which is very much needed if you want to drive down electricity prices. Also, we have made huge progress in the domain of protecting our level playing field. And that is where this vehicle called the Accelerator Act is all about. How do you make sure that things are being produced in Europe, that we continue to support competition, because that is a good thing for us as citizens, but we're at the same time very much against unfair competition and stuff being dumped on the European market, for example, from China, eradicating whole European value chains. So I'm always impatient. I'm never satisfied with how much we are doing. There's always a lot more to be done. But I do think we have used the last 15, 16 months as a Commission wisely to make important steps forward.
And what about this competition with the US and China? Because every big country, I'm gonna consider European Union as a whole, correctly, against China and the US. I mean, the US is investing a lot in subsidies to companies. China is investing a lot in clean tech manufacturing. What's the response to that competition from Europe? And are we at a critical disadvantage compared to their investments, or can we really make our own path?
I'm going to be honest with you. We're running faster, but we still need to step up significantly. We need to make life simpler for our companies. We need to reach that point of energy independence. We need much more exposure to innovation, which is one of the areas where the Americans outcompete us. We need the so-called capital markets union, which allows money to flow freely across the continent, which would help Italian entrepreneurs, French entrepreneurs, German entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs from all over Europe to access to financing, which is hugely important if you're running or wanting to start up a business. And with all of these elements, we simply need more speed of delivery. We cannot wait, because it is indeed true that we're facing significant competition from the US and from China. And we're having a range of dangerous dependencies in certain value chains vis-a-vis China. And that has to change.
And aren't we weighed down also by competition across Europe, between member states sometimes? I think about Germany and France, for example, not about climate, but just to give an example of how even European countries sometimes can be their own enemies in a way. Or how are you dealing with that when it comes to climate policies?
Yeah, so what is important in my view is that we push the boundaries of the internal market. One of the core strengths of Europe is that we have this internal market, but there are many parts of that internal market that are not yet there. Just to give you one example, it's only 2 hands full of jobs, that if you have those jobs, you can work across the border. For many other jobs, you would need additional qualifications. You would need additional paperwork. And the same is true if you're having a company. You can set it up in Italy, but that doesn't allow you to immediately sell your products in Sweden or in Finland. You need to go through the paperwork every single time. We have to simplify that. We have to make sure that our companies enjoy the advantages of scale. because that is one of the main things that the Americans and the Chinese are currently doing better.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Wopke Hoekstra. Is that correct?
It couldn't have been pronounced better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, because I mean, it's been 10 years since the Paris Agreement, so it was an important moment to sort of make some sort of reasonment again around what we're doing and what we'll be doing climate-wise in Europe. So you have a lot to work on.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
All the best for your next work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.